Hello, this is Shambhavi. Welcome to Satsang. Satsang is an ancient spiritual practice from India. It means being in reality together. I give Satsang live every Wednesday and Sunday night in Portland, Maine. This Dharma talk was recorded during one of our Wednesday night gatherings. Please visit jayakula.org to learn more about the teachings. You can find video satsangs on Jayakula's YouTube channel, and my books are all available on Amazon.com. Much love to you, wherever and however you are. Tonight I want to talk about something that I wrote online today. I was playing around with a new poster for the satsang, something a little more wild style than what we've had. And it just kind of came out that I came up with this little phrase that could be kind of like a tagline for Jayakula. And right now the state of the tagline is fearless wisdom for waking up hearts. And I wanted to talk about this word fearless and why I put that word in there. What is it about this tradition that's fearless? We certainly aren't fearless, so I'm not talking about us. We're full of fears. But the tradition itself does have a kind of fearlessness. And what does that mean? It's a fearlessness that when we walk this path, if we walk it thoroughly, then we also become fearless. So we can come to embody the fearlessness of the tradition. And in fact, I would say that despite everybody's fears that we express a lot through our activities of body, energy, and mind, I would say that the people who are most attracted to plus suited to this tradition actually are usually somewhat a little more fearless or a little more courageous, you could say. It's kind of a necessity, and this is why. First of all, the tradition teaches that the tradition itself is provisional. That word means that it's temporary, it's impermanent. The tradition teaches that it itself is temporary and provisional. And that when you actually realize enough, when you realize who you really are, that's what realization means. So it's called self-realization, because you realize the self, that you don't need any of the concepts or practices of the tradition. One of the most often repeated kinds of paradoxes that you'll hear from teachers in not just Chinkashaivism, but also all the other direct realization traditions, so Chen Buddhism, some forms of Taoism, etc., they all say the same thing. I practiced and I practiced and I practiced using the view of the tradition and the practices of the tradition, and then when I got to a certain point, I realized I didn't need to have done all that. As I love to tell people at the beginning of one of the major texts of this tradition, the Vijnanabhairava Tantra, a form of Devi, of Shakti, is questioning Lord Shiva about all the different concepts in the tradition. Please tell me, says this very practiced yogini, I've done all these practices, I've studied, I've realized, but I still don't understand certain things. I don't understand the 36 tattvas, and I don't understand the 14 other things, and I don't understand the 3 and the 10 levels of this and that and the other thing, and I don't understand this concept and that concept. And Lord Shiva says, all of that stuff is utter nonsense. He says, those things are only for babies. All of those concepts and levels and descriptions of reality are for babies. They're for people who aren't very far along. And when you get further along, you don't need those things. And then he says, but since none of us are that far along, we'll keep going with this. That is a fearless kind of a tradition. And it requires a kind of a fearlessness from us. Many, many people in spiritual traditions of all varieties are looking for refuge from the concepts and ideas of the tradition. They're looking for refuge in that. They want to know that what their tradition is telling them about reality in the specific terms that they're being told it. You know, heaven and hell and ascension and whatever the terms of a tradition are. And every tradition has a view and various concepts and a cosmology. Every tradition has that. When most people, when they start studying in a spiritual tradition, they want to feel confident that what they're being told is the, bottom line truth about everything. That helps assuage their anxiety and their fear about their own existence. They feel then that they have a certain container, certain meaning sure, a certain or a sure container for what they're doing for their lives. And those traditions exist because people need that. So I'm not knocking that at all. People need those things, and they should have them. And this reality and its beneficence has given us many, many traditions. And 95% of them, if not more, will proclaim the absolute truth of what they are teaching. This tradition and the other direct realization traditions does not proclaim the falsity of what we're teaching. The truth and falsity, again, have no meaning here. It proclaims the usefulness of what we're teaching. We're not really that interested in the truth, which is another thing that is fearless about this tradition. We're interested in how reality is, not in some, marble carved truths. So we're not saying it's not true and therefore it's false. We're saying throw out true and false. Let's use something that actually gets us where we want to go. We're interested in the useful and the practical. And this way of working has, for thousands of years, helped people to wake up, to relax and discover who they really are. And that's the value of it. Right? It's a technology for waking up. It's a protocol, right? And we can fall in love with the descriptions of reality that this tradition offers. And we can be excited by it, and we can become very attached to it. And that's completely fine. This tradition says that's not a problem. After a while, though, you won't care. Whether it's this lifetime or 5 lifetimes from now, after a while, you're just not going to care about how many tattvas there are, all that stuff, because you are just in aware livingness. There's not really any need to have a system to describe it. If we look at another direct realization tradition, one from Tibet, there's a practice called Chöd by the great woman Dakini Yogini Machi Lobdron. Her students wrote down her practice. It's an incredibly elaborate practice. Chöd is one of the most elaborate, most technique-full practices you could ever find. And it's done in many, many different ways. I practiced it not as my own practice, but just with this other practitioner, kind of being there and helping out a little bit, but not. So I saw a little bit of it. It's incredibly long and involved. And there's a book that came out a bunch of years ago called Machik's Explanation. It's literally like this big. And it's this long, long, long detailed description of how to do this practice and the view of the practice and blah, blah, blah. And then at the very, very end, like 600 pages later. And Machik said, the ultimate chöd is hold no view. After 600 pages of view teachings and practical teachings, her student wrote down, and Machik said, the ultimate chöd is hold no view. My Dzogchen teacher said the entire practice could be summed up in the words, relax in your own nature. That's really, you don't need all of these things, all of this apparatus, if you don't need it. But most of us need it. So we do that. And it's okay to do that and be very attached to it. But in the end, it's not important. It's only useful. So that's one way in which this tradition is fearless. Another way this tradition is fearless, and this really bugs people, or thrills them, depending, is that it's completely non-dogmatic. It doesn't have a paradigmatic answer for every situation. Should I eat meat or should I be a vegetarian? Depends on your circumstance. Should I have sex with someone who's not my partner? Depends on the circumstance. We're like that about everything. Because we are looking into reality. We are looking into our real circumstance to try to feel our real circumstance in all of its fullness with our body, our energy, and our mind, so that we can be skillful in responding to the uniqueness and freshness of every moment. I probably have been asked 1,500 times, what should I do if, or what should I do when? And then someone gives me some sort of generic situation. What should I do when someone asks me out and I don't have a good time and I want to not go out with them again? What should I do when that happens? Right? Everybody wants like a rule. Right? And how many times have I said, well, I don't know. You have to tell me your specific situation. I don't know what you should do in a generic sense. So that's another way in which the tradition is fearless. And then the third major way in which this tradition is fearless, I could probably go on about this, but I want to give you some time to talk, is that it does not depend on belief or trust. Most people are much more comfortable being told to believe something or trust something. In fact, despite the fact that we're in the least religious state in the country, apparently, according to magazines, most people are more comfortable with religion than they are with what we're doing. Right? This is very fierce. It's very fierce to be told, no, don't believe me. Go and find out for yourself. Right? This is a tradition of find out. So one of the ways you start finding out is by being in satsang. Because in satsang you can have a real experience of something out of the ordinary, a real experience of more of your nature, of your enlightened essence nature. That's the purpose of satsang. It's good to discuss and ask questions and have questions be answered, and that's all fun to do. But the real purpose of satsang is so that you can experience something. So that you can find out something. Now the problem is when most people come to some kind of a practice like this, even if this isn't what they think consciously, at least subconsciously, they're hoping that someone else will do it for them. If I just believe in you, or if I just trust you, or if I believe what the tradition says is right, or if I get Shaktipat, or something like that, it's all going to be taken care of. It's not like that. Nobody can make another person realize. It's really up to you and the infinite constellation of wisdom. One of the things that has helped me to develop a lot more modesty and humility since I started teaching is realizing how little I really can do. How little I'm able to speed up anybody's path. And as I've joked around before, there have been so many teachers much more realized than I am, and no one has ever made anyone else enlightened. Not even the greatest teachers that have walked the face of the earth. Not one person has ever been made enlightened by somebody else. It just doesn't work that way. So sometimes we come to a tradition, or we come to God, or we come to a teacher, kind of throwing ourselves at that person's feet in some way or another, literally or metaphorically, expecting them to do our work for us. And it just doesn't work that way. So this tradition actually demands that you do the work yourself. You get help from the teacher. You get to be with the teacher and be in what's called transmission. Transmission just means some kind of alchemy between you and the teacher helps you to feel something you couldn't feel on your own. That's all that means. But what you're feeling is you. Right? You're not feeling anything that you don't already have. It's just like you relax and something becomes more accessible to you, in you. And then I can give you some techniques. And I can hold your hand when things get rough. But I really can't do much more than that. I have a very small part to play, I've realized. So the truth is that is a fearless way to engage in spiritual practice. Really taking responsibility for yourself. And even as a practitioner, your role is fairly small. You are practicing in an infinite constellation of wisdom. It's not all up to you when you get results or when something changes or opens up for you. It's not all up to any one of us. We are living in an infinite web, and things just happen when they happen. So this is what I mean by fearless wisdom or fearless spirituality. We're looking into what actually is. We're trying to get beyond our fairly infantile, I don't mean that in a derogatory way, but just sort of spiritually immature notions about someone else is going to do it for us, or our tradition is the ultimate truth. That's a very immature, relationship to a tradition. And it's fine. Some of us are very immature. So we need that. That's great. But that's not what this is about. So it is a fearless tradition. I think that's one of the things that made me fall in love with it so much. Understanding that it was getting rid of itself as you practiced it. It's like you're eating the tradition into oblivion as you practice, right? Sometimes my Buddhist teachers especially will worry about, what's going to happen to our tradition. But the thing is, it's only about nature. What we're investigating is nature as it actually is. So that will never go away. There will always be ways to investigate that. We don't have to be afraid of losing anything. So this tradition really says it's okay to be attached to the tradition, but that is provisional. Your attachment is provisional. It's just useful for a time. Right. We like to have our lives be sort of fraught with meaning and importance. We enjoy that. We like to have our lives be, full of the excitement of accomplishment. All we're accomplishing is nature. So I think that for whatever reason anybody ever gets into this tradition, or any tradition, when you become mature in your approach, maturity just means you understand more about reality. Right? Your real motivation is just amazement at how life is and wanting to find out more about it. Right? That becomes the primary motivation. It isn't divorced from devotion. And that's very important to understand. It isn't divorced from compassion or devotion or any of those things we associate with spiritual accomplishment. Coming to know your real nature more inevitably gives rise to devotion and compassion. So we're just going step by step together on this incredible adventure of finding out, who am I really? What is actually happening here? Who are all these phenomena popping up all around me and going away also? What is really the nature of existence? That's the path we're on, is finding that out. It's a very thoroughgoing path. And in order to find out what's really happening, we have to go with our eyes wide open and our senses open, using everything that we've brought into this life to help us. Everything that you brought in your body, energy, and mind is like your laboratory. It's your tools, your laboratory, your microscope, your telescope. And you're letting all of that enter into what actually is right here, now. The practices help you to subtleize all of those tools. So you're not trying to look into the depth of reality, with some clumsy tools. That doesn't really work. What the practices do is they relieve you of obstructions to your senses so that you can look in more and more deeply over time and start to embody more of those cosmic virtues and cosmic wisdoms in your own expression. The tradition teaches that you won't be saved because you don't need to be. That you're already perfect from the beginning because you are an upsurge of this enlightened reality, and that your only issue is you've forgotten that. And there's certain obscurations in the way of your senses that are preventing you from directly knowing what's here and being able to work with it. This is really the heart of this tradition. Jayakula is a nonprofit community offering opportunities to learn and practice in the direct realization traditions of Trika Shaivism and Dzogchen. We are based in Portland, Maine and Portland, Oregon. Visit jayakula.org to explore more of our offerings.